before we start with asking you to respond, films sort of affect us beyond facts and beyond figures. And probably a lot of you here today are science students who deal with observations and numbers. But films reach us at the level of emotions and they reach our mind. And so I just would like to take a few minutes before we get to you to ask you all to respond to what you felt, what you thought while you were watching these films. So if we can have a couple of audience responses to start the session, please.
The second film reminded me of the Aarey protests, which were at pre-COVID, I think, before COVID started. It was a lot. There was a lot of hype about it around the social media, but then it soon died out because the COVID wave came into picture. So that did remind me.
Anyone else? Did it make you feel anything specific?
It reminded me of my grandmother's village, and when we were kids, we also used to take a boat, and village people would kind of join in, and we go fishing for crabs and things. And I know now when I go back to the village, things have changed a lot. Even though village people are very transactional, everything costs money. So in those days it didn't. Like people were just really happy to invite you over home for lunch or take you. But today everything costs money there. So I was having a laugh with myself with, maybe we taught them to become like us or so that loss of innocence.
Thank you for sharing. I'll come to you, Bijoy and Iravatee. What were your first thoughts when you watched the films?
So thank you firstly for inviting me to be a part of this panel. I found all three films to be very impactful, and I think a constant running theme in all three films is um, environmentalism is all about environmental justice, especially for those people who share very close relationships with the environment. And these are what a lot of early scholars called the ecosystem people, peoples whose lives and livelihoods are very closely linked with the environment, unlike all of us. Um, so yes, that was one recurring theme that I thought across all three films was about environmental justice. So I think for a lot of us, especially even when I was a younger student, I thought environmentalism was about leaving wilderness untouched or nature untouched. But that's really not the case. These people have very real material relationships, often very utilitarian with the environment, but they still have close relationships with it. So I think that was a really that really impacted me for all three films. Um, and probably the second thing which came to mind, especially in the third film, was about the value of individual action versus a systemic change. What matters more, and what would have a more long-term, a long-lasting impact? Probably the answer is both together. But does individual action matter more, or should we be asking for systemic change? So yeah, those were the initial thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much, Manasi. Thank you for triggering some thoughts. Especially like what came from the audience as well, the whole sense of relating to it. I don't know how many of you, all of you did relate to it, and even your silence kind of speaks. The silence is often a response to being stunned by what you see. It's because had 1 year tuned to the audience when, as each film finished, I could hear some gasps, some sighs, and no one laughed. Clearly, these are not films that make us laugh. But why did I use the word laugh? Because it's really not in context. But we've had a relationship with nature for a long time where we've thought, there's more of this where it came from, and And now suddenly the narrative has changed, saying, no, there's not enough. And this has happened within my lifetime. I'm 50, so within my lifetime, I've seen and heard both of these narratives. That there's a lot where there's more. You can go back there and get. There's more fish. And I remember, especially the first film. Then I remember reading a book. I think it was early in the 2000s when a book by Saman Subramanian called "Following the Fish" came about. It's of course a collection of essays looking at the human relationship with fish, but one of them is, it starts from something as simple as the Hyderabad fish medicine that people used to take for asthma and all the way to the declining industry in Goa, the fishing industry, where the journalist goes and spends time on board a fishing trawler, and understands that the fish are going away, depleting. So the more you continue to take without knowing what causes this plenitude in the ocean. I think when we have a disconnect with that reality, that's when we sort of totally lose connection with the environment. So all of these stories, especially the last one, it's about a continuing connection. It's about a family striving to connect, where most people have, as you said, you use the word transactional. So right. We just, it's all about transaction. It's all about, you have a QR code and you pay and you're finished. That's it. That's your relationship with what you pay for, what you eat. And there is an interesting, since many of you must be on Instagram, there is a handle worth following. I think it's called In Season Fish. Yeah, very, very good. And if you are fish eaters, like I'm from Kerala, it has changed the way I look at how to approach fishing. In the sense, what to eat at what time of the year is also linked to where it comes from, and how much there is, and how you can make sure there is enough fish, for other creatures in the sea, as well as for our consumption. And maybe a conversation that begins there can lead to some other kind of awareness that that we can take back with us, starting with what's on our plate to what we'd end up eating. Now people are today talking about eating insects and all of that very happily, without realizing that this is, we're only thinking about our future. We're still thinking about how are we going to survive, not how this ecosystem itself can thrive. Sorry if I've taken a little long.
No, not at all. In fact, I would just like to say that In Season Fish was supported on a project by BSF, and please check out the BSF website. The small grants projects that we have supported will give you a very interesting look into what are the kind of problems that organizations and people in the city are talking about. And the In Season Fish project was called Ocean on My Plate. So the idea there is to, again, I think, sort of look at how we rebuild these connections, right, with our environment and with different elements that are, coexisting on this space with us. But I would like you to respond to the sentence or a claim that was made in one of the films, that this jungle is here because Adivasis are living here. And to that extent, I would also like to sort of have your reflections come in based on your work, and you work on habitats and people. So, yeah.
That also made me think. I also got reminded of a recent paper, a research paper, which has looked at the forest cover that is now left globally, and where indigenous people live. And there's a very strong relation that the researchers found. So there definitely must be, it is, of course it is in their culture, but also, like I said, it's in very real relationships that they have with these ecosystems. And I think that generates probably some value for them to see these ecosystems thrive, because they're directly dependent on them. I was really glad that none of the documentaries, this is a related point, were about biologists driving jeeps and pretending that they save the world. This was really about real people. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I respond to that point as well, is because there is a trope of filmmaking that is really about, and you also did mention that earlier about separating people from the environment, and I guess this is also a lot of what we grow up on because of what we must have consumed. You must have seen these pristine forests, and you see the contrasting visual of people. But coming back to your question, Mansi, I think it's see, we could have all been people of the forest if we chose to, in the sense that or people of the wilderness. It depends on all these terms, wilderness, nature, all of these are still very othering terms. We still see it as something to go out and see, or that we come back to another space. How about we sort of flip it and look at the space that we inhabit as a space that's shared with nature, that we are part of nature, right? So it is, in a sense, what the Adivasi person says in the film is that it's not and if you try and read between the lines, it's not like the forest, yes, is there because that is their world, and that could be our world too if we didn't see it with that lens of otherness. Yeah.
Thank you. What did you all feel about that sentence? Did anybody sort of feel an objection that it's wrong to say it like that, or did it inspire you maybe to sort of think about your own relationship with what is around us? We would really like for you all to also sort of be a part of this discussion, because the way we envisioned it, it's not a panel discussion where some experts are coming and talking and then you have to listen to it. We want you to ask questions, we want you to respond to the points being raised. We want you to object to something if you so feel, because that's how we will sort of move ahead and try arrive at some ideas for what we can also be a part of going ahead. So please share your thoughts.
Especially the last movie that we watched, and that looking at that personality, that old man. So I remember Salu Mardatin Makapu, who inspired in the same way, planting a lot many trees.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. One more question I have, and that is for the audience, which takes a bit from what Sir said and what you said, Iravatee, about this. You spoke about how people who are doing science probably may be involved more in conservation and all of that. But science and development, science and technology, science and biology, ecology have a very tricky relationship, I feel. And as much as there's positive influences, there's also not so positive influences which reach us to what you said about biologists going with the idea that we are saving the world, right? And not necessarily cognizant of the relationships or the intersection between people's lives, livelihoods, pristine environments, or where there's a more give and take. So, as science students, what do you think about this?
There's a false notion amongst the students, especially with National Geographic and Discovery channels and other things. They think we are going to be the saviors of the world. But at the same time, there are biologists, there are researchers who are actually rooted to the cause, what they are actually doing, and they are not seen in the limelight. They don't come in your National Geographic interviews, they don't come anywhere else, but they're actually doing something which is worthwhile and which is helping to sustain so many of the flora and fauna, since the discussion that we are talking about it. And there are people who are really interested in such kind of a solution. So there's a problem. They're not finding a solution, or they're not the solution alone, but they're actually becoming root cause for the solution. They are bringing awareness among the people. And I would like to say, I'm also part of the urban population. So we are trying, sort of lost our connection to nature. So whatever may be the reason that we have had since our childhood to the growth. So somewhere down the line, we have lost our touch with the nature. So we have become so much engrossed in our daily day activities, Instagrams and all those things that's happening with us. So we don't know what's actually happening in the nature, especially when in that Adivasi movie and they were telling that they actually try to say when it's going to rain heavily or not, depending on what kind of a nest the bird's going to build. So many of us don't even know, we don't even observe what's there in our surrounding. But I think it's very important for us to make sincere efforts. I think it's a learning lesson for us as well as professors. We need to imbibe those things to our children. So we should ensure that if those things goes into them, definitely even these biologists will not just become only the documentary makers or so-called saviors. They'll definitely become the real conservationists.
Even though we are studying biotechnology in our courses here, there is a course that is introduced to us in EBS, which basically tells us about environmental studies and all. So with that, whoever teaching us well is like telling us the importance of environment, how to save it. So we are trying to, like, we are getting into that step to save the environment and all.
Just to sort of probably get some of you to speak, did the films make you guys reflect on your own lives, consumption? And do you have any thoughts about that?
Actually, I'll be answering the question that you asked him. That once you see these movies, right, what is the word that came to your mind? To me, two words that really struck me was exploitation and deceit. To me, it's crazy how this false idea is sold to us in the name of development. When it actually, yes, true, people are buying land, taking over, these rural areas in the name of developing aquaculture, agriculture, and all that. But it's there was this term actually in the last movie, money lenders. So all of these people in the chain, nobody's actually really concerned about development at all. Everything, they're just playing a role in the transaction. Oh, I'll buy this land, I'll sell this to a person. I'm really not bothered about what he's going to do next. I'm making this profit in the name of development. It's good to me. And that's the notion that kind of came to me watching the last movie. And I think that kind of idea also plays to some extent in the earlier two movies.
Thanks. I like those two words a lot because I think that's the fundamental, messaging that goes out in all advertising and all sales. So how well can you deceive somebody? How much can you stage something? And having worked in the industry myself, I know how that is. I have a sense of guilt, and I'm trying to sort of atone for it now in my current life. But if we just look at in the light of what you said, there are two words that come to mind. One is in Hindi, everyone asks you, what is the value of this? Kitna hai? Or kitni deti hai? So these are the two things. You're only looking at how much you can get out of something. And maybe it begins with us as consumers. And going back to Iravatee's question about consumption itself, it's an evaluation. Right? For instance, how did you choose to come to work today? I come to college today, or little choices like that become part of. And this is not at a level of preaching. Huh? It's trying to understand how you. I'll quote somebody who was talking about traffic in Bangalore, and I'm a victim of that today. I came in late as I'm unaccustomed to it anyways. But when people talk to you about the traffic problem, they say traffic is a problem. And if you break down traffic into the molecules that make up traffic, you and I are part of that problem. So when you start seeing the problem like that what shift can each molecule in this flow of traffic make? And then sort of look back and say, hey, these are small changes. And if we evaluate the questions and promises, especially that people make to us, and saying, oh, you will get this if you give up your land, or you will, and this is what you stand to gain, and it's all in rupees and dollars and all of that. That if you take those shiny numbers out of the equation, what is it that we get in the end? And there is really no material answer to that problem. And it's when we evaluate the material consequence or the immaterial consequence of things that you you sort of realize that the answers are really about us thinking collectively. While everyone thinks of, I mean, the advertisers, marketers, all of them think of us as collectives. We'll say audience. Film के लिए audience होना चाहिए, right? You need an audience for a film. You need this. You need a market for this. You need a budget for all. This is the talk that you get. But actually, they're only thinking of us as collectives when there is a commercial exploitation involved. But if each person in that collective is considered as an individual with certain moorings to whatever question is being thrown at them, then the whole equation changes. So if you, for once, maybe start with the question, why am I part of this collective? And maybe that's where the answers will stem from.
Thank you. Actually, that's sort of a nice segue for me into the last bit I would like to talk with you all and with everyone here. In terms of, so a lot of these for us, especially in the cities, were things that are out there. There's no sea next to the city. There's no, like, we have Barnela National Park and all, but the concept of biodiversity, environment, and all of this is very out there. So if you would like to sort of link it back to our lives here in the city, maybe with your work on Soul Care, and what is it that we can be mindful of within our lives and sort of contribute to being a part of the solution instead of just the problem. Just a few quick words.
Yeah. So this goes back to what I was saying about earlier about nature not really being out there. It is part of you. I mean, so you could, for instance, during the pandemic, I began watching birds and I haven't stopped. So I have one eBird you can keep a streak, and I have a continuous streak of something like 1,800 days or so. But more than that, that's just a way of keeping count. It's like how some people go for a walk and say, I close my ring and all of that. So that's my way of keeping count. But more than that, it's about the data that effort has yielded over the last almost 5 years now goes to show that there is such a richness of biodiversity in our own backyards. And if you extrapolate that to what everyone can do in terms of if you go out and as science students look at the trees that are planted there, look at the trees in your neighborhood. How did the trees get there? Were they part of some forest department drive? Are they native? Are they exotic? If you just go and start doing things like that, then you get a much more real sense of how you're connected with your environment. And I think that's if you don't have to go out there to begin. Is the crux of what I'm saying.
So needless to say, I think it's the very nature of the system that we live in that we are alienated from the products that we are using. So I would say whatever we are using in our daily lives, let's start questioning everything. Let's start looking at our impacts, even though they seem like it's happening far off. I don't care where the coal that's providing me this electricity is coming from. So let's start being more curious and let's start questioning. And another thing is, this is sort of drawing from one of my professors. When we talk about ecological restoration, we often think about some habitats elsewhere. We never think of cities for ecological restoration, right? But that's a power question. Why aren't we talking about restoration in cities? So let's start asking such questions as well.
Hello, sir. Coming to the last movie that we watched, so in that reformers asking the industrialists not to cut trees, not to make misuse or exploit the nature. So I got one saying that we humans cut trees and make papers and write on the same paper, don't cut trees. So what's your viewpoint on this? And how we are going to meet the needs?
So you all must have heard of the Chipko Andolan, right? So it is very there's a very big misinterpretation about the Andolan that people were hugging trees because uh, they they had a very, like I said, a material relationship with the trees. So that's required. It's not just about conserving something for the sake of it, but also because you derive some utility from it, right? So it's fine to use paper, but the way it is being manufactured, sent all around the world, those are the things that we need to question.
Okay, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us in this session. Some very thought-provoking questions, and I hope that all of us, at the end of today, will have certain points that we take back with us, which we can reflect on. And you may think about, why are we talking about flora, fauna when this is a film festival about climate change? But what one needs to think about are the interconnections, and there are a lot of things that maybe are not immediately climate change, but they have an impact on, or they are affected by the changing climate, and as we all are. So please keep that in mind as you watch the rest of the movies. Thank you.